They put a dime in the jar. You told me so. Yeah, I
We're
know.
talking about give it, you know,
Well, you know.
put a dollar in the jar. We'll get a pizza party at the end of this thing. Um,
Hello, and welcome to another Damn Anime podcast. My name is Nick, and I'll be your host. Here with me is my good buddy Joe. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. I'm just excited to talk about the new Nier Automata version 1.1a anime that has just come out. Um, you and I did a prelude cast at episode 0 a little while ago where we talked about everything that we knew so far about the anime. Well, finally, it is here. I'm a bit of a fan, and you are willing to humor me on some of this stuff, so I'm really grateful for that. But I'm excited to get into the new show. So yeah, it just dropped today. Um, on I watched it on Crunchyroll a little after 11:30 our time, Central Time. And Yeah, I don't know where to start with this. It's Well, I'll just start with what you think first about the opening here. So give me your thoughts on how this show began.
All right. Well, you know, it starts off with the whole narration and then the classic poster scene of 2B carrying 9S.
Right.
Oh yeah, spoilers by the way, guys. Just
Oh yeah.
spoilers all around. This is about the actual like episodes.
Yeah.
So if you watch this and you're like, you guys spoiled stuff,
We We're gonna
yes, we did.
we're gonna spoil the shit out of this. So just fair warning. That's a good point, Joe. Fair warning. We are going to be talking about this, not quite play by play, but that is definitely on the table. Talking about everything. So yeah, go ahead and take it away, Joe.
All right, so my actual knowledge of the game isn't that much. I've played the first handful of hours,
Yeah.
but that was, so essentially the first episode is like, I've gotten just a little bit beyond this. But yeah, so they kind of give some foreshadowing of, or a little bit of hinting of possibly things to come in the very opening clip. Then it quickly gets into the action, where you see them flying, and I thought that was a pretty good transition. I thought it was well animated. I made comment before that any CG being used should probably be done for any machine, which would look fine, and like any scenery things like water. And that's what they do. The water looks really decent, in my opinion, and they do a really good job making the robots, look good with the CG. Now, the only problem I have with it is there's a few scenes where you see 2B very well while she's in the flight suit,
Yeah.
and she looks like hot garbage. It is like if you were going to make a statue and have her like erect a statue of her in in that flight suit, that's what she would look like. Now, when they do the up close, it's all animated and it's great. But there's one scene right away in the beginning when she takes control of the pack and she goes in for like the actual combat sequence, and then later on when 9S gives her his flight unit, and then she gets in, and you could just see it just looks like garbage. Um,
100%.
and
I
that's
totally saw
yeah,
that for the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, that looks terrible. But yeah, go on.
no. Other than that, I think it looks really solid. I'd like the sound design.
Yeah.
Some of it sounded maybe a little overly overly, I don't know how you say it, sound quality, like
The
some
music
of the sound
is
effects.
kind of too good. Or
Yeah,
you're talking about
there
the
I've
sound
seen
effects or the actual music?
the music is it does stand out in both a good way and a bad way.
Okay.
I enjoyed it, but the thing is, it was like some of the sound effects just seemed a little off or a little too, like, you didn't necessarily need to have it like that poppy, I guess. like some of them sounded like should have been like toned down just a little bit
Okay.
because they're like, yeah, I just didn't imagine that sound effect. But
That is like a common
overall,
problem, and I've heard in some anime. I didn't really hear it in this, but I wasn't really trying to pay attention to that. I guess I glazed over with that part, but I have heard that in some anime where it's like, okay, that like footstep or that sword swing is a little too crunchy. There's a little too much going on there.
no, but I like the opening sequence flying through the tunnel,
Okay.
and just like very much that Star Wars final run to try to blow up the Death Star, like
Yeah.
that kind of invoked that feeling. Uh, it's just kind of funny though because like all the other teammates, they're just all dead. Like they just die like just off
Yeah.
screen. You
Yeah.
just get the verbal confirmation that she's solo now.
Yeah, they kind of do that in the game a bit more. They actually have, I mean, you know this, but they have those other people speak a little bit, and before they kill them, like immediately. In this, they're just like, I think maybe one of the other flight units said like one thing. So that's kind of a weird thing of coming into this without ever having played the game, just watching the anime. You might be a little confused by that, where you're like, okay, she was with like one other, but they kind of have an offhanded line. So I kind of wish they'd spend a little bit more and just press copy paste on that flight unit, and just had like three or four more flight units and then showed them, I don't know, getting blown up all together. Because that's what happens in the game is they all go down together, and she, for the most part, and she survives. But yeah, thank you for addressing the elephant in the room straight away. I was going to do this if you didn't, but I'm pretty sure you were going to. The CG, yeah, we in the episode 0 prelude, we did talk about CG. We were pretty apprehensive about it. Um, I like this scene, this early scene where they are flying in the flight unit, and she is going, 2B being the main character, is going through and fighting the robots and then flying into the factory. That is the best place to have CG. Um,
It
be,
did look really good. Like I said,
I
it provided enough quality. And the action was, like
I
as
don't.
far as Japanese anime
I
goes,
know. I know.
CG's overall pretty
I
bad.
know, but
So
like I did not really appreciate it. It's the best place to put it, but it being the first thing that you see out of the gate, I did feel like they could have put a little bit more money, or I would have preferred that they put a little bit more money into that very first thing you see being, okay, yeah, this is CG, but hey, it's pretty good. It's really good CG, and I felt like this. Some of the models I felt were fairly low res. They popped out from the screen, and really early on, I was kind of just like, I kind of just had my hands like over my face, just kind of like that, just kind of like, oh man, this is, if this whole thing is like this, I don't know. If we're gonna be able to do the podcast, because we might just have to fucking abandon it. It might just suck so bad. But they got through that, and to be like you said, she's flying in, and she crashes through this thing, and then as soon as she crashes through this thing, it turns all the way back into 2D animation. It's like, okay, I think we're more or less sort of safe now. And then they start to like introduce and then I think they cut away to 9S, um, and start to show like what he's doing. But
well, they actually right after she crashes, they do cut to the opening credit scene.
oh yeah,
And
okay,
yeah,
yeah, we
so
should talk about
the
that.
opening trailer, uh it was unique, I guess, is because they decided to show modern Shinjuku and then just having them like run along the silhouette of like the scenery, the backdrop, the walls,
Yeah,
and it's just like it just seemed really kind of out of place. I mean, I can understand now. This might be just this is me reaching as far as I could reach as far as the back lore goes because essentially all this takes place like very very far into the future timeline because of was it Drakengard 3 ending 3 or something like that, 3 or C or D, um where they open up a portal. The monster comes to like modern time Japan, and when you defeat it, it turns to ash, and therefore causes the plague death that comes
I think it's.
around. So I'm like,
I think
so that's the
they do
only
something else.
relevance I
Yeah.
can see about
Okay.
making it a modern time Tokyo.
Yeah. That was very odd. I felt like um, the intro was actually kind of cheap looking. It was a standard. It felt like a standard anime intro to me, and actually a little bit boring because it was like all in black and white, pretty much. And then the city like morphs, and they're like running in shadows, and then there's like mountains, and there's like mechs and stuff like that that they're flying around in. But for the most part, I was kind of like, okay, this intro is sort of ho hum. Um, guessing as to why they might want to do it that way. I would say they don't want to give anything away from what's happening later, so they don't want to include a lot of later scenes to bump up that intro, which is a common thing in anime. Um, and then they only have so much money, so they're not gonna like make bespoke animations for just that part. It would have been nice if they had, but I think pretty quickly I kind of was like, okay, I'm getting an idea of the budget for this thing, um, and it's definitely not huge. So they did what they could, and maybe if there is another batch of episodes, or maybe in the middle of this batch of episodes, maybe they will change over to a better opening. I would hope, but that's kind of like it's just like a cherry on top if you get a good opening. Really, you want the meat of the show to be good, and a good opening is like, oh, this is cool, but not super necessary.
Yeah, I mean, it was just it was very much a generic opener. It reminds me a little bit of was it the Eminence of Shadow? They do a modern like they do it's all fantasy and everything, but then the opening is everyone in modern day uh Tokyo with and that their characters look exactly the same as far as facial features. So all the girls who have elf ears still have elf ears, but they're in like modern schoolgirl or business attire. And it was just like, this is really odd because none of this applies, but okay. It's just, I don't know.
But
Maybe
here
it's
we
like current
are.
trend.
This is just what
Yeah.
we're
So
gonna do. Okay. um, yeah. So I think kind of just commenting on the animation a little bit more. We uh 2B and 9S I think are pretty well animated. Their their character models are good, and they move pretty well. Uh, Same voice actress and same voice actor for these two characters. I don't know about the others. They're going to be coming into the show, but for these two characters at least, same actors as the game, and I think that they are doing a good job. So that's nice. But for the animation itself, I can tell that there are a little bit of places where um, they're lacking frames. There's a few frames in some of the fights so far that it's like, okay, this is like normally a fight would be on maybe twos so that it can be done quick and snappy with a little bit of ones. I can tell that some of this looks to me like it's on threes because it's like, okay, she is moving, here to here, and they're trying to make it look snappy, but it's clear to me that there's just a little bit too much missing. But I'm gonna talk about more of that, why I think that is a little bit later. But just kind of moving this along, just kind of giving a little bit of a how the story is progressing in the show. Um, like we get introduced to 9S, I think right after the opening sequence, right? Yeah. So we get introduced to 9S, and there's this but right before that, there's this kind of weird one-off scene where there's one machine pouring oil on another machine that is clearly dead. And 9S comments that that's not going to work because he's like way off in the distance. And then and he's kind of doing something on a computer screen, and that's by the time that 2B makes contact with him, and then they meet up, and they get their mission, uh, which is to destroy this Goliath machine. Is all that they really say. So you go, okay, Goliath is probably gonna be a big thing, and they're supposed to go and blow that thing up, and they're kind of zeroing in on it. And then after that, they pretty much split up, and 2B goes like starts to go down, and 9S goes in his flight unit. I think it's a little bit different from the game, from what I remember, but that seems to be the way that it works. And so they use that time to show you, as 2B goes into the factory that they're in, they use that time to show you a little bit more of the machines and what they're doing. Um, they show you that some of the machines that they are at war with here, that these machines don't have red eyes, they have yellow eyes, and that's, I guess, to signify that they're like neutral, because these other machines that have yellow eyes are not like doing anything. They're just kind of watching like 2B. And then some of the other machines, as they go deeper into the factory, they see some of the workings, like they're pouring lava and clearly minting new of these robots, of the bad robots. And 2B or 9S comments like, nothing that the machines do has any meaning. They're just like mindless robots. And so like it continues on.
Yeah,
Um,
essentially, you get the vibe that they're just going through the motions. Just like so they have somewhat of an imprint of like the humans before them, so because you're hearing the factory kind of spout things off, and that's why the robots were like acting like they would before, because like if someone passed out at the workplace, you dump water on them or something like that, like if it was an indentured servitude, and
uh,
so it's like they're kind of going through these human like motions, and so they're that's all they really explain. It's like they're just kind of some like a residual memory, as it were. And yeah, there's just like like you mentioned, there was just those robots that yellow eyes, just standing there, not moving, just standing there looking around, not hostile. And while the factory is continuing to make more machines, they don't explain whether necessarily the machines are all combatants, but they just they're going through doing their thing. To what extent, who knows? So yeah, that's all they really, kind of explain. And then they're talking about, as she's venturing to try to get to the core of this Goliath.
yeah, yeah. So they are sprinkling a couple of these little things in there, and I'm just bringing those up because I know that they're going to come into play a little bit later. But they do a really good job of like getting that stuff in there. It's like, okay, we have to, we got 23 minutes. We have to put these things in early and at least mention them in order for this stuff to make sense later. But quickly, she goes down, and then this like red beacon like shoots past her, and she's like, oh, like 9S, it's coming toward you. And so as the red beacon comes like out of the factory up at the top, it gets put onto this machine, this giant machine, and then that thing comes alive, and like they bring in these two arms. Dang, I totally skipped a step. So right about the time, let's see. Um, so
Well,
go
while
ahead.
you look for that, one thing I did want to mention is they do, during the whole after she gets in and she makes contact with 9S, they kind of make him a little chatterbox.
They do, yeah.
He's talking about how he's usually a solo guy, as a recon, he doesn't, or a scanner, some I think it was, and that's why he doesn't really get to speak much, and he seems to be really just elated with having someone to work with. So that's kind of, they're giving him a personality in this sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
he definitely has way more of a personality. That's way more forward than two B's. But the part that I missed is that the way that two B and 9S actually link up and meet in person for the first time is there's this two B's going through killing enemies in the factory, and then this giant saw arm breaks through one of the walls, and she has to fight that, and 9S comes in and is able to save her after after she has some trouble with fighting it. She like defeats it, but then it like comes back to life. And that's when 9S comes in with the flight suit and like blows it away. Uh, so that was pretty cool. I was like, okay, that's definitely different from the game. I'm pretty sure. Um, Gosh, I need to play that game again, so I can remember everything that's different. But that's when they split up and go their separate ways, looking for how to find this Goliath thing. And then it comes up, and then they both come up and start to fight it. So yeah, it's and then we get a lot of CG again once the Goliath machine thing comes up. It's back to CG town, but I mean, like watching this the first time, I was somewhat disappointed with some of this stuff. Watching it the second time, I was like, okay, I kind of understand what they're going for more.
Yeah, because
And
the CG, honestly, the way they're implementing it here doesn't bother me.
okay,
Then again, I've also watched things that are far more egregious, and like they're still animating uh the actual characters, while everything else, so they're animated while the Goliath machine and the background is CG. So it still gives you a place and a focal point. So long as I'm just glad they're not animating the characters, because if
yeah,
they were, because they'd be very stilted, and they do this with like dance sequences for idle animations, or uh like the anime Knights of Sidonia. I forget the company that does that, but all their early stuff is just really bad.
I remember
Like
hearing a
they
lot of bad things about Knights of
um
Sidonia. Yeah,
the story is actually really decent for Knights of Sidonia, but like everything else, like the actual quality of looking at it is really hard to swallow at first. And yeah, so that's just, I didn't think it was that bad at all, as far as making the machine and all the background parts look the way they do.
yeah,
And yeah, the fight sequence goes pretty smoothly, I thought. They end up introducing 9S trying to do his hacking bit,
yeah. I was going to
and
that next.
they
Yeah,
kind of make him show off as he's entering like the grid, as it were. And that was decently animated, I thought. They make him cocky as well, which is, he has a bit of an attitude with them. I mean, he even answers his the operator in the very beginning with a hi, which is like a yeah, yeah. And so, which is very much a high school mentality,
yeah,
because as a teacher, English teacher, you'd be like, or just a teacher in general, when they say hi, usually it's just one yes will do, and
mm,
so that you kind of hassle them for saying yes twice. um and that's what the operator does, so they give him that, like that, childlike mentality, I guess.
yeah,
And then for him to be cocky, being like, yeah, this, like, these defenses won't stop me, pretty much. So yeah, it was kind of neat to see
yeah.
that.
I will say that the actor does do a pretty good job of making 9S likable pretty much immediately. I think he's. I know a lot of people don't like 9S, but like from the game. But I thought he's pretty likable immediately, without having too many lines. Like he gets right in there, and it's pretty good. But yeah, 9S. Tubi's fighting the Goliath on her own at the beginning, and it's not going the best. But then Nine swoops in again and says, "Hey, uh, you you can't like do this alone, or like you can't just." He was like, "You can't just like start swinging at it." I forget exactly what he said, but he basically said, "You can't just go hard at it." And that's when he hacks in, and you see kind of that whole world, because that is a big aspect of the game. So it's good that they introduced that like straight away. I don't remember ever doing that this early in the game, but that's because I don't know. There's some weird stuff that happens. So I guess you probably could, but I'll save that for later. Um, so Soon after the hacking bit, 9S is mortally wounded, and but his hack is somewhat successful as the Goliath goes inert for a minute. It just kind of like slumps over, and then 2B runs up and comes to 9S's aid. And this is like one of the first times that we see a good bit of emotion with 2B. She is clearly distraught and not Um, she's not she's not in control of her emotions as she is trying to help 9S and his injuries. She um, like the little helper robots that come with them. She commands it to start administering these first aid protocols, and the robots like we don't like. He says like we don't have enough, or this is not the protocol for this type of situation. And she's like, just do it. So she's clearly not thinking according to the mission parameters that were told to her. So that's kind of an important factor, that she definitely has some more emotion at this point, and it's kind of like, well, like that's kind of weird, like why is that? Um, but 9S like calms her down, and uh, and tells her to take his flight unit so that she can continue the fight, because the Goliath is going to come back online. Um, and then right after that point, that she leaves on the new flight unit, we hear 9S saying something to the the robot that accompanies him, telling it to basically begin downloading, or rather uploading, Tubi's memory banks, and then it cuts out and goes back over to what Tubi is doing. She's flying around, and she's fighting the Goliath thing some more. Does some cool moves, and uh, jumps out of her flight suit and stabs the thing in the head, and kills it finally. Um,
Yeah, so I believe their helper robots are just called pods, or
yeah, that's
referred
it.
to as
Pods.
pods.
Yeah.
And
Pod
yeah,
42 and 39, something like
um,
that.
there was the like you mentioned, 9S keeps on referring to her fighting style as being like just rough,
Yeah.
essentially, or like a brutal, something like that along those lines, because she's very much just like hacking, without real finesse, I guess is the best way to put it. But yeah, after she defeats like the first robot, and then it slumps over, and he does reconnect with her, and that's when, during that fight scene, you see three other core units like flash a little bit, but you don't really get understanding what's going on. So it's not until after the first is defeated that you see um, three other Goliaths start emerging around them in like a triangle formation.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
So
this scene's pretty neat. Yeah, I'll go ahead and explain it.
yeah. So at that point, so they just had all this trouble, and both almost died with this one Goliath that it wasn't even like fully online. Um, and then three more do pop up, like you said. And so the implication there is, okay, we're fucked. Like we can't, like our both of our flight units are down. We barely could handle one. So how are we going to handle three? Um, and at that point, yeah, reconnects with 9S, and 9S pulls out this little black box with these kind of white striations on it. Um, and Tubi pulls out like one from from herself, and they touch them together, and then like the whole area just detonates and like totally explodes. So they're caught in this like massive explosion that is meant to consume them and the Goliaths, and like just destroy everything in the area. Um, which is pretty cool. There's this meme that I have to talk about. There's this meme that I saw online a long time ago, and it's a picture of them doing that in the game, where they're both like holding up these like black boxes like that, and it's the like text at the bottom is like, "Let's trade lunches." I just thought that was I thought that was so funny, because it does look like they're just like sitting at a picnic like with these lunches. Um, but anyway, so yeah, so they blow that area up, and then and then it cuts to a shot of space, and this space station that's like their mothership, and kind of explains that really quickly. Hey, this is like the androids like mothership, and Tubi wakes up in this bed, and she's like saying some stuff that is kind of cryptic and somewhat philosophical, I think. Um, and then she gets up and it shows her running through a hallway, and she meets 9S in this hallway, and it's this kind of curved hallway, so you can tell that she's on some kind of a space station, I guess, is the implication there. But she meets 9S in the hallway, and she says something referencing what just happened, and 9S lets her know that he doesn't remember anything up until the point that uh, just until the point that they met. Um, so everything that they kind of went through together just then was lost.
Well, he was able to upload her consciousness beforehand, but his, on the other hand, yeah, but he does, relay the fact that the mission was a success. And upon hearing the fact that he lost, or he does not have memories of them ever meeting, because, one thing I think you missed out is like before they touch black boxes and detonate the reactor, or cause that reaction, he gives a heartfelt, like, it's been an honor to uh fight with you. So he obviously has stronger emotions, but then now he's like a blank slate again. And you see her gripping, gripping her fist and like saying, pretending like things are normal, and she has like a grimace on her face a slight bit later. So you know that she is not happy about this. And it kind of hints to what happened in the very beginning opening sequence too, whether or not
Yeah,
that's the future or the just could be how many times in the past, but whether or not he's been getting nuked or wiped every time and has no recollection, and she just gets to see him die a bunch, and so she gets to essentially make friends with him all over again and then just watch him die, and she's retaining all these memories, and so it's kind of like a one-way time loop. So
yeah,
she
it
gets
is
to,
a little
yeah.
bit that way. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. I forgot about him giving that heartfelt goodbye. Um, uh, yeah, and that is a really telling scene where I think it's the very last thing that is part of the true show. Um, is as he's walking away, it zooms in on her fist that she like clenches, and so you can tell that she is frustrated with the situation at the very least. And it's yeah, so it brings up a lot of questions, and but it also does kind of answer that very first scene, like, okay, so you would probably think that the very first scene where she's carrying his body, that would be like some shot of the future, but um, as much as it actually does the opposite, it muddies the waters there. So yeah, now you don't know if that is the future or if it's sometime in the past, and all this has happened before, in, like you said, like a one-way time loop. But at least in her mind. So yeah, uh, I thought it was pretty good. I thought that ending there, it got to the point of what they were trying to do, and it ends on a pretty interesting note. Do you have anything to say more about the actual, I don't know, summarizing goings on of the episode before we maybe start talking more about general thoughts and maybe different little nuancy things?
Oh, well, I thought it was a decently strong first episode to get people who don't know much about Nier kind of on board, because it's enough little cryptic stuff here and there, but for the most part, it's just a action focused episode, which is enough to get, you don't want to lose people's attention.
Yeah.
Um, that's, I guess, the hardest thing is if you take it too slow, you know, not everyone will do the 3 episode trial. They'll usually bounce out right away, especially if they know something remotely, like, oh yeah, that Near, that's that weird one that I've heard a little bit about, or they may have heard someone else talk about how messed up or how unique it was. But if they tried doing something too elaborate and too slow, too many people would bounce out. But making it a little more simplistic and just having action focused, I think they'll keep people at least interested for episode 2. And then by maybe episode 2, you can then start getting into actual character development and start jumping around with more than just 2 people essentially. I think that would be the smart move, because by the time episode 3 happens, you can actually have a real plot laying down, and that'll keep people hooked in for the long haul. So we'll see, but I think they'll probably introduce a handful of people next episode, is my prediction. So I thought that was an okay way to do for episode 1.
Yeah, I think they probably will introduce. Probably, I think there's at least one more character that I'd be willing to bet they introduce, and maybe 2 or 3 more. But so for you, just on this episode alone, what would you rate this episode alone on a 1 to 10 scale?
That's a hard one. Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. Over if depends on what you're breaking it down with. Between animation, fight sequence, or sound and all that stuff.
Just like, I mean, just like
Probably like
overall, just general.
I'd say it's a 7.
Okay,
I'd tell people to go ahead and watch it. I don't say it's a must watch. But I would say at least like totally give it a shot. Take a look, see if it piques your interest. It's I would openly recommend it to someone. If it was a 6, I wouldn't recommend it, but nor would I shun it. I would say, but if someone said, "Hey, I'm watching that," I'd be like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." But this one, on the other hand, I'd be like, "Yeah, if you're remotely interested in any of these themes, science, sci-fi, anything having to do with machines, androids, like the concept of human, because they kind of hint at that a little bit,
hmm
because they 9S starts to talk a little bit about the difference between the robots versus the androids
right,
in mental thought, and then she interrupts them saying, "What's that have to do with this?"
yeah,
Um, so that's they touch on things like that. If any of that interests you, then for sure give this a watch. Uh, and that's where I stand right now.
okay, that's good.
So I'd
So
say like a 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10. Okay. So yeah, for me, I watched the first episode and I just was like, or I watched the episode the first time, and I was like, okay, this is like a 6 out of 10. I was just like, this is not really. It's not bad, but it's not really. I had to get my expectations in check. I would say. So I watched it again, and I started thinking about it in terms of somebody that had not played the game at all, who's coming to it brand new, and maybe a little bit more realistic expectations on budget and what's possible for a property and an IP like this. And I ended up coming to a 7 out of 10. Like I was like, okay, this is really more of a 7 out of 10. There's definitely some serious weaknesses to this show, but the sacrifices that it makes, it doesn't. You can tell that it's sacrificing some aspects for the sake of getting tons of action and tons of story into the episode. So there's I mean barely any scenes where things are not moving. And I have to applaud that. There's so much anime, even action anime, even like shonen, hardcore action anime, where they are standing around for large swaths of the show, and for all of its faults, this show it keeps things moving, it keeps scenes changing. They are going from one environment to another just about every 3 or 4 minutes. So once I started thinking about it in those terms, I was like, okay, this, they are making sacrifices. They are putting in a lot of CG, but it is so they can get this story moving very quickly, because there's a lot to do and not a lot of time to do it. If they're only going to get 12 episodes, which, we have to assume that that's what they're assuming is, hey, we're only getting 12. So we have to get to a good point here. And so once I kind of thought about that and started to try to enjoy the show, because I watched it the first time thinking like, okay, I'm just going to sit down and enjoy this. But that was really hard to do because I knew this podcast was coming. So it was really hard for me not to think about it critically. And it was actually in the second watch through that I took notes, but I was actually able to enjoy it a bit more, I guess, because some of the pressure was off. And I was able to pick up on some more things and appreciate some things like there's this one part where 2B and 9S are talking via the comms, and 2B is standing on the edge of this factory looking out over the sky, and there's like this rustling, and she like looks over at it, and it's these birds flying, and 9S goes like on the comms, he's like, is something wrong? And she's just watching these birds fly away, and the sun like hits them, and it's like kind of pretty, and she's like, no, it's nothing. And then the show like goes on from there, but they took a couple times like really carefully chosen scenes to give these characters some humanity, and even more than like shows where that humanity is not in question. I guess that's probably why they did it, but I definitely enjoyed certain parts like that. And yeah, it's the more that I think about it, the more that I like it. The more that I'm kind of like I settle in with what they're doing. I'm like, okay, this definitely makes sense, and I think that somebody coming to it totally blind, um, that somebody like that might not like it, but I think they gave it their best shot and gave it the best possible shot at getting a total newcomer to be like, okay, I'm in for this, and I'm in for maybe the next one too. So yeah, I would say 7 out of 10. I'm glad we both came to that conclusion. But I might come back to this at the end of the show, after it's all said and done, at least these first 12 episodes. And I could see myself bringing this to an 8 out of 10 just on this episode alone. But it depends on where they
They're
go
gonna
with it.
clockwork orange you and just strap you to a chair, peel open your eyes, and you'll just be like Alex, and eventually you'll be like, "No, dude, this was 10 out of 10, man. It was a masterpiece. What are you talking
It's
about?"
definitely not 10 out of 10. It's definitely not 10 out of 10. I would definitely say that there's no chance that it's getting to that point, and I would really say that I would never probably put this at even a 9 out of 10. But as far
I
as
would say it would get an 8 out of 10 only in hindsight if
yeah,
there's enough in the future episodes that happen if this happened to have enough foreshadow. But that's doesn't really count because when you look back at something and realize there was more to it, um, you know that's automatically nostalgia hitting you at that point. You're like, oh wow, you're getting more out of it because of the later episodes,
mhm,
not for the episode itself having the merit that it was there. Yes, you can appreciate it more when you watch it for the whole series again, but it's like, not your initial. I think the initial impression is really important.
yeah,
Yes, the whole series or or certain episodes can increase, get better or worse over time. You're allowed to change your mind, but honestly, I think this initial impression is clutch. But I do think you came at this a little harsh, only for the animation style, but that's because you're not familiar with how garbage a lot of animation
I
can be.
know, I know. There's some
So
garbage stuff out there, but man, those assets are not that high res. They could have they
neither was the entire background of the entire game. That all
I
looked like
know.
PS2,
That's it's wonderful that you bring that up because I was thinking like I was like as I was watching this show probably 3/4 of the way through, I was like, oh, of course, it's Yoko Taro. It's supposed to be shit. It's supposed to be shit, and they're just gonna count on you just powering through and appreciating what comes later. But as far as like the presentation and stuff, it's like just good enough to get that to power that story through because that's always what Yoko Taro does. He does the gameplay and everything just good enough to keep you interested in and playing for the story. And I think that's where we are now with the animation too.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that was pretty much with it. With the actual episode itself, they do have a little fun ending bit there.
Oh yeah,
Uh, a quick explanation with via Puppet Pals.
I love this.
Uh,
I thought this was
it's very
great. Go ahead.
very much a Gynex kind of feel to it. For anyone who remembers that the studio used to what it used to be something like Kerry Kano slash His and Her Circumstance, which was the same director as Evangelion. So
Okay.
like the ending of the actual TV series, how it gets weird and but yeah, they have these little puppets trying to quick give a rundown of an explanation of a little bit of the tutorial of the world.
Yeah.
The
So
androids
go ahead.
numbering a letter system, they quick break that down for you, and then they give an ending, or like the way they explain it, yeah, which is kind of funny.
It is super fast. But as soon as like the light, the last scene of her clenching the fist like went dark, and then there's a light that comes up immediately, and it's like it's on one of the pods, and he says we're gonna explain to you some of the world and the alternate endings of Nier, because like in Nier Automata, that's a big deal, is all the alternate endings. And yeah, they bring out these puppets, and they talk a little bit about how the different models of android units, like there's like the B unit, the A unit, the all the way through, and they're like, and there
um
might even be some more. um
yeah, it's A B, let's see,
it goes to like
there's
G or something like that.
ABGH OS, which is the attack battler. There was the healer, gunner, operator, and scanner. Were the ones they mentioned are off the top. And then how they mentioned 2B is a culmination of attacking gunner. So hence the two before the B. And
Hmm.
that's because she's a gunner and attacker. That I guess that's what qualifies her as a battler. Um, but yeah, that part I didn't actually know, so that was kind of neat to know to figure out.
Yeah, they don't really go into
Um,
that, at least from my recollection. They don't really go into that too much in the game, but the manga, I started reading that one time, and the manga did kind of go, because there's more characters, and they're like, okay, well, you're this and you're this and you're that. They kind of explain a bit more.
so just because you talked about a meme worthy thing earlier, it's about a few weeks ago, I noticed on Reddit someone drew like a 3D box. It was just a 3D, normal cube, and he goes, and now here's a 3D sci-fi cube, and it was the same darn thing, but it had a line, and then at one point it goes 45-degree angle up one tier, and then the line continues. And he goes, that 45-degree angle isn't necessary for it to be science fiction cube. And
That's fair. Yeah, that's
then I
exactly
then
what
I
they do.
saw this and I just couldn't help but laugh to myself because their black box has a bunch of those angles on it. Uh,
The 45
yeah,
degree sci-fi with the circle at certain points. Yeah, that's there's something about that just rings science fiction to our brains. But um, yeah, so yeah, the puppet. Then they then like 9S, the puppet 9S starts to explain the cube, and to
the
be
black
like
box. Yeah,
the black box, and to be sneaks hers out, and then she like brings it closer, and he's like, oh no,
Hey.
wait. And then it explodes again, and it like does the credits like roll super fast, and it says to be continued.
Yep.
So yeah, that was really good. I was like, okay, they're definitely having fun playing around with this and giving you some pretty good value. So
Because
um
the actual series has an ending for every letter of the alphabet, or the actual game
yeah,
does. I'm pretty sure.
I think so.
So which, fingers crossed, that means there'll be, like, it'll be a 20, 20 plus episode series, but well, I like I said, I'm still sticking to my guns. It'll be 12 to 13, and then they might have a second season if because as you mentioned before, your thoughts on budget, and it's easier to sell a 12 episode box set and then sell another 12 episode box set and then sell the culmination of two box sets together.
And
Uh
then make the movie that doesn't matter to anything in the story. Yeah.
or that's the movie that retells the whole season one. Yeah,
Yep, and then
it's
sell that separately, and then sell season 1 and 2 and the movie in its own box set. You're right. It's
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I was really scared there at the beginning, but I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to doing it every week. It should be pretty fun. A couple extra little things. Um, music. We kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. It is the music is Okabe's soundtrack still, which is very forward and powerful in a lot of ways. So it kind of stands out. But I'll say that the music goes along with helping this anime feel pretty unique to me. Even after having played the game and stuff, I feel like this anime is a lot different than a lot of other anime that you see, poking around in on Crunchyroll and stuff. So it's something different than your standard isekai or romance or samurai sword swinging, young punk hero or whatever. It's different from those things, and I definitely appreciate that.
No, for sure. I mean, it's the first episode came out strong, a solid 7 is my opinion, and it most definitely warrants at least giving it the further go. I mean, we're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, thank
Good
God
or for
it's
better or
decent.
worse, and it's like so. I mean, it'd be more entertaining for I guess the viewers if it's for the worse. But no, hopefully it's I have
uh,
faith that it'll be solid, and they've already discussed how it's going to be slightly different, so it's not going to be like a beat, and it's already shown it's not going to be beat per beat like from the game,
yeah,
so there's no worries about that. So it'll be enough freshness for you, and within probably the next episode, it'll probably be anything beyond my knowledge of it, so it'll be all entertaining for me. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Should be fun. Looking forward to it. All right. Well, this podcast is getting a little bit long in the tooth. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to catch you next time.
yeah, take it easy, guys.
Bye.